Okay, welcome back everybody. Glad to see you all here in the global virtual lecture hall. Can we very quickly make a round just to see if everybody's connected? Can we start with Beijing? Can we briefly have a statement, just say hello? Hello, I can see Professor Peppel in the front row. Okay, hello?
Yes, hello.
Okay, I understand. Okay, thank you. So can we switch to Warsaw to see if they're connected?
Hello, good morning.
Okay.
We are in Warsaw.
Morning, Witold. Okay, good to see you again. Okay, so can we switch to Munich?
Good morning, Rolf. This is Munich.
Good morning, Mark. Okay, well, that seems to work fine. Okay. Can we switch to Zurich?
Okay,
Simon?
Good morning, Tokyo. Good morning, Rolf.
Okay, good morning. So you finally managed to get up? Okay. Good to see you. Okay, can we now switch to Switch for a second? Can we switch to Switch, Maria? Okay. So I just wanted to show you, who is basically taking care of all the technology in the background. Hi, Maria. Okay.
Good afternoon
so you see,
Beijing, good afternoon to Tokyo, and good morning to Munich, Zurich, and Warsaw. To my right side is my colleague Hanspeter Kunz from iLab.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So I just wanted to show you this so you can see who is actually doing all the kind of technology in the background from Zurich. Okay, now about today's lecture. So the topic of today is synthetic psychology, designing from the bottom up. As always, at the beginning, we have a bit of news items. So there was just finished last weekend the International Robot Exhibition in Tokyo. And the subtitle of the exhibition is Robot Technology Pioneers the Future from Manufacturing to Personal Life. And what you see here is actually a robot that speaks fluent Japanese. I mean, it doesn't really understand Japanese very well, but it speaks. It has facial expression. I will come back. I will give a short overview of this exhibition that just finished last weekend in Tokyo. So I think it's unbelievable how realistic this robot actually looks. And, of course, at the robot exhibition, I was very happy to see that we have Karakuri Ningyo, that we all know from the last lecture, where we introduced the symbol grounding problem. Also, I was really surprised to see that in Japan Times, I mean, I don't have share in Japan Times, but it's just a newspaper that I happen to read. There was a full 2-page article here that you can see on the newspaper, a full 2-page article on Alan Turing. Here you can see a caricature on the left on Alan Turing, and there are 3 articles. One is about the Turing test, and of course the famous program ELIZA that mimics a psychotherapist, and a paranoid computer program, kind of a psychiatric patient mimicking a paranoid personality. And then there's something about the life of Alan Turing, and then there is an article called iRobot. It's about the Loebner Prize competition, and that's all about the Turing test that we also discussed here. And there is an annual competition that I also mentioned called the Loebner Prize competition, where you can send in programs, and then there is a jury that judges which one is the best kind of the program that mimics human intelligence best. And here I think is a really cute quote. This is actually a syllogism that was written by Alan Turing himself. And I think it's nice to think about this. Turing believes, you all know what a syllogism is. It's like all humans are mortal, Aristotle is a human, therefore Aristotle is mortal, right? That kind of thing. And this is the one by Turing. Turing believes machines think. Turing lies with men, therefore machines do not think. Of course, because this is self-referential. This was written by Turing. You cannot figure out possibly whether this is true or not. Okay, well, there's an autobiography about Turing. So it's in the daily papers, so I think what we're discussing here has, in fact, a high degree of actuality. Now, as I think, very interesting item, today's is Konrad Lorenz's 100th birthday. And Konrad Lorenz, as probably most of you know, is a co-founder of ethology and behavioral science. Was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1973 for his work on, behavior of animals. And in particular, he's known for his work on the grey-lag goose. Now, at the occasion of the 100th birthday of Konrad Lorenz, there is a workshop in honor of Konrad Lorenz, the third Sino-German workshop on cognitive neuroscience in Beijing. And one of the organizers, or the initiator, is Professor Ernst Pöppel, director of the Institute of Medical Psychology from Munich, who currently is in Beijing for this particular workshop. And he is also now attending these lectures in Beijing. Maybe I can we can switch to Beijing, and either Ernst Pöppel or maybe Professor Brown can just say a few words about what the relevance of Konrad Lorenz's work would be in the context of what we're discussing. So, maybe you want to take over, Beijing?
What do I have to do here? Well, Rolf, here's Ernst Pöppel in Beijing, and we are sitting here. Nothing happens. Doesn't work.
We can hear you.
Should I push a...
We can hear you. We can see you and we can hear you. Okay, now there's no sound.
Mature, no sound.
Now it's okay.
There is. There's sound now.
Right.
Rolf,
now it works.
Here's Ernst Pöppel again. Now you hear me? Well, perhaps he hears me, perhaps not. Wonderful. Okay, great. So we are sitting here in Beijing, a delegation, actually not only from Germany, but also a representative from Warsaw, and Professor Miyake from Tokyo. And we are discussing aspects of cognitive neuroscience. Now the question was, what is the important contribution as we see it now by Konrad Lorenz to advanced artificial intelligence? And I think with respect to embodiment, he has made a very important contribution. He is a discoverer of the imprinting phenomenon. So imprinting in modern terms would mean the following. Human beings, most of the creatures that have an advanced brain, enter the world with a genetic program of possibilities. And in the first 10 years or so, these neural connections which are potentially given have to be reinforced by information processing. So let's take a language or vision. We have a genetic program to see or to move or to remember or have emotions, but to have a matrix of all these repertoire of psychological phenomena, in the early phases of our biography, we have to use these neuronal algorithms, and only then do they work for our entire lifetime. That means, in the words of Professor Pfeifer, in the first years of our life, there's some kind of embodiment taking place. In German, we have this very nice word, Einverleibung. Rolf tried to translate that. So we somehow internalize the external world into our brain. And so we actually do not process information on the distance, Außenperspektive, external point of view, but we are directly connected to the world. And in that sense, I think Konrad Lorenz has made a very essential contribution to modern science in any way, but also for artificial intelligence. And I think this imprinting should be used for the development of smart robots. Thank you very much.
Well, okay. Thank you very much, Ernst, for the statement. So I would just, I do think this is extremely important, and I would like to add that, of course, let's say the raw material, the stimulation is provided by the particular type of embodiment that humans or animals happen to have. So if you don't have any eyes, you cannot generate visual stimulation. If you don't have ears, you cannot generate acoustic stimulation. So I think the embodiment is extremely important to view embodiment in connection with the concept of imprinting. So yes, I think this is a very interesting point of view, and just as an item of general information, I think it's important for everyone here to actually know about Konrad Lorenz. Okay, thank you. So now we can switch to the next slide. So are there any questions from last week that we haven't had on the forum? I actually have one here. I have one here. Which okay. Was discussed on the forum. I have a little problem with the smartboard here, which was discussed on the forum, and I asked the question last time, if you remember, what happens if instead of 4 or 5 robots in the Didabot experiment, Swiss robots, we use only 1 robot. Now, I think people provided the right sorts of answers. So the answer is, well, exactly the same thing happens. You also get about as many clusters as with 4 or 5 robots. However, it may happen that actually 1 robot gets stuck. So robots do get stuck fairly often in this experiment. They get sensory stimulation from both sides, and then maybe they start wiggling back and forth and can't get out of the corner. And then if you have other robots coming by, passing by, then it can happen that one of the robots hits the robot that's actually stuck in the corner and frees the robot again, and the robot can move around again freely. So in some sense, you could argue that actually the in some sense you could argue. We have a problem with the smartboard here. That the robots, that the robots are in some sense helping each other. And the point is, of course, as with the cleaning up, they don't know that they're helping each other. They're just helping each other. So there seems to be a slight problem with the smartboard, but we may be able to get in control of that. Okay. Well, in any case, I was very interested in seeing the discussion on the forum, and please, if you have questions, post them to the forum. We will all try to look at them during the week, and then maybe if I think a discussion is of interest for everybody, I will bring it up here during the lecture. Okay, now, just a second. I will work from my notes until we have the technology back on track. So, as assignments for last week, we had Warsaw, a special assignment for the Warsaw students, Warsaw participants, and the task was to prepare a short presentation on the concept of ecological niches and how this idea applies to robots. And as we said at the beginning, we're of course interested in natural systems, but also in artificial systems. So we want the concepts that we use to apply also to artificial systems. So the idea was that they provide us with a presentation of ecological niches and application to robots. Now, we tested everything before the lecture, but as we all know, Murphy's Law, if anything can go wrong, it will go wrong. And I think we have the same. This slide's lecture 4. Okay. I think we're almost back on track. So as soon as we're ready here, okay. So we need to do a restart. So we have to wait for a second before we can have the presentation from Warsaw. Okay. Well, that's no problem. I can start in the meantime. I was going to outline the topics that we discussed today. So we finish chapter 4, which is about designing complete autonomous agents. And then we switch to designing from the bottom up. So bottom-up design. Okay, now I briefly mentioned last week the idea of complete autonomous agents, Masanao Toda's fungicide. Masanao Toda is a famous psychologist in Japan, and in the 1960s he was at the Institute of Advanced Study in Princeton in the United States, in New England, and he was, as a psychologist, a bit frustrated, or let's say unhappy, with the way psychology was going at the time, especially cognitive psychology. So what psychologists, especially cognitive psychologists, do is they take the human being, they fragment it into small pieces, like memory, logical reasoning, language, emotion, perception, and so on and so forth. And then they make tests, tightly controlled laboratory tests on these abilities, and then, for example, they make people learn long lists of numbers. They say a list of numbers like 5, 25, 16, 86, 27, 14, 15, 90, 18. And then they ask people to recount this list, and then they count. They look at what sorts of mistakes they're making, and so on. Now, Masanao Toda said, well, what they're doing is really they're testing humans on what they're actually bad at. We're really bad at remembering long lists of numbers. I'm sure nobody here in this auditorium, or even in the global virtual auditorium, would be able to recount this list of numbers that I just mentioned before. Or if anyone wants to volunteer, because this is being recorded, we can check later on whether you're right or not. But I think people are really bad at this. And Masanao Toda said, well, why do we always test people at what they're really bad at? Rather than testing them at what they're actually good at. And what are people good at? People are good at coordinating things, at doing many things at the same time. For example, we can drive, we can talk on the mobile phone, we can look at the car navigation system at the same time, we can drink coffee, we can talk to other people, and we can even maybe watch the traffic signs at the same time. So we're very good, and some people really excel at doing everything while they're driving. And Masanao Toda said, well, let's kind of look at what people are good at. Let's maybe make simple systems, but complete systems. And that was the idea of fungus eaters. And I will just, before I switch to Warsaw, I'll just finish this topic of fungus eaters and then move back to Warsaw. Okay, so he said, well, let's think about the following. Let's create a creature and let's send the creature to a distant planet. And there, the creature has to collect, that was in the 60s, people still believed in nuclear power, and in many countries people still believe in nuclear power, and so people were afraid that we would run out of uranium ore to fuel these power plants. So the task of the fungus eater was to collect as much uranium ore as possible, and the more uranium ore it would collect, the more reward it would get. And on this planet, there is a particular type of fungus, a mushroom. That's the only thing that's known about it. There's uranium ore and there's a mushroom. And the fungus eater has to feed on fungus. So that's basically its energy supply, its energy store is fungus. And I will come back why this is important. And so we were thinking about what the fungus eater would look like, because in Mazanao told us books and papers, there are no pictures of the fungus eater. So it's very abstract. And so there's a German fellow, Stümpke, and he wrote a book called The Rhinogrades. And it's about an artificial species. And you can see here, we tried to get inspiration about the artificial species. Here's another one, and here's another one. Maybe these would be good candidates for, kind of visually imagining the fungus eaters. Now, Isabel Follart, a former philosophy student who also attended these lectures about 5 years ago, came up with this illustration. And you can see this is the fungus eater sent to a distant planet. And now, this is also, this idea of a complete autonomous agent. Complete autonomous agent. And why is it complete? I mean, we saw last time when we looked at the Mars Sojourner, right? Remember, Mars Sojourner? It can no longer be remote controlled because the time is about 20 seconds for a signal to travel back and forth. So, what do we need there? We need a bit of autonomy, right? It has to be autonomous, obviously. Well, if it has to collect uranium ore, we cannot simply simulate it. You can simulate it for a long time. You will not have any uranium ore, right? So it has to be embodied. The environment is largely unknown, right? So the agent has to be available. It has to be able to acquire information about the environment while it's there. It cannot be pre-programmed to do that. And this is a property which is called situatedness. Situated. Yes? And last but not least, it has to be able to survive over extended periods of time. And there are no engineers there that can repair it, that can recharge the batteries or anything. It has to survive on its own, a property which is called self-sufficiency. So this is what makes up a complete autonomous agent. And you can see why Mazanao suggested this example. This was, by the way, one of the first ideas about video games, computer games, having creatures of that sort. Well, imagine, there's a lot, for example, about decision-making. There's a lot about decision-making. Imagine that the fungus eater is right in front of a large uranium ore storage, right? But its energy supply is very low already. So it has to eat some fungus, because if the fungus store is zero, the fungus eater is no longer operational, it's dead. Right, so what does it do? The fungus store is very low, but there's a lot of uranium ore. Now, should it go look for fungus first, but then it has to come back for the uranium ore, Or should it try and take maybe a little bit, or how much? Because the more it takes, the more energy it will use when it moves. And maybe it can take a little bit and, take that, and on the way, just try to look for, on the way back, look for fungus, or what should it do? So there's a lot of room for relatively sophisticated decision-making that needs to be done. Also, it will need, of course, sensors, right? We were designing a tea-serving robot. They will also need sensors. Well, this one will need special sensors also. Why? Well, because it has to collect uranium ore. It will need a sensor for radioactivity, right? And so on. So you can see this is a really interesting kind of game that we're playing. Okay. Now, just briefly going through these terms, we had this idea of autonomy last time, and we saw that autonomy is not so much a property of an individual, but rather a property of a relationship. If, let's say you have two individuals, A and B, and if A knows about the internal state of B, and A knows how to control the internal state of B, how to make it change from one state into another, then B has little autonomy with respect to A. Whereas if another individual, like, let's say, C, knows nothing about B, then B has a lot of autonomy with respect to C. So we see autonomy is a property of a relation rather than a property of an individual. We tend to think autonomy is a property of an individual. Now, it's also connected to situatedness. Well, how is it connected? It's connected in the following sense. If the agent is situated, then it has the capability to acquire information about the world, to make its own experience, to build its own history. And this history will probably be hidden to most other people. If the children, like parents, they like to know what children do. But if children make a lot of experiences on their own, they will potentially acquire a lot more autonomy with respect to their parents. So autonomy and situatedness are two closely related concepts. If you're situated, you can acquire a lot of autonomy. Okay, well, this is... about autonomy. I mean, here the idea is, just to give you the idea of the illustration, horses are known to be, somewhat autonomous, and there's this saying, you can lead a horse to the water, but you can't make him drink. So basically, the horse can refuse to drink. You can, just because you don't know how to transform the horse into the state that it would like to drink. Now, self-sufficiency, the concept of self-sufficiency very briefly, as I said before, it's the ability to sustain oneself over extended periods of time, to survive over extended periods of time. That means, and in the real world, if you have a real world, not the world of chess, but the real world, there are always several tasks. There is never only one task. Animals, they have to get food supply, they have to build a nest, they have to get rest, they have to care for their offspring, they have to reproduce. There are always many things that you have to do. And this robot here, for example, was designed to collect soda cans in a research laboratory. And at the same time, it has to maintain its battery charge. So, it has to collect the cans, but it also has to see that the battery never gets too low. Now, what this robot decided to do is, I have to see that the batteries are not getting too low, so I just remain at the charging station. So this one just, basically lazy remains at the charging station. Now, it always has a full battery, but then it can't do its job properly, right? And then this is what's called an irrecoverable deficit. So it acquires an irrecoverable deficit, even if it were to spend its entire time now collecting cans, because continuously, new cans are produced, new empty cans are produced, it will not be able to finish its task anymore. So, and typically for animals, the cycle in which no deficit should incur, so this is called an irrecoverable deficit. Recoverable deficit. It is typically one day. So if you incur a deficit in your energy supply over 1 day, then in the long run, you're in trouble. So you have to see that you never run into this problem. And this is a difficult optimization problem because you have many things to do. That's the real world. So self-sufficiency is a difficult problem. Well, this so much I wanted to show you for chapter 4. It's a difficult chapter. Not everything is obvious at the first reading. And you may want to turn back to this chapter later on. Also pay attention to these time perspectives. It's in chapter 4, and chapter 4 is now available for online downloading for those who haven't seen that yet. Okay. I think what I would like to do now is, in fact, go back to what we couldn't do before for technical reasons. And we have a presentation from our friends in Warsaw on the ecological niche and its application to robotics. So, Warsaw, can you try to take over?
Yes.
Okay, so I have to give permission on the application sharing for them to take over. I say yes, of course, because we want to see their presentation. Okay, and I have to go to full screen mode, and now we have on the screen the presentation for Warsaw. Okay, so please go ahead.
Hello. Our speaker is our graduate student Janusz Matkowski. He will speak on ecological niche and its application to robots.
Hello. First I will tell what exactly is an ecological niche. Then I will give some examples related to the living organisms, robots, and at last some market analogies. There are many definitions of an ecological niche. I allow myself to choose 2 of them. First, it can be defined as a region in a multidimensional space of environmental factors that affects the welfare of a species. It's quite complicated, the definition, but it's very universal, and for us it may prove useful. The second is very clear, as opposite to the first. Range of each environmental variable, such as temperature, humidity, and food items, within which a species can exist and reproduce. It may be not very clear at this moment. I will move to the examples, and I hope it will become more clear. Here's the example for biology. The archaea are sort of microorganisms, and they can live in very extreme environments. Thanks to some evolutionary adaptation, their metabolism and structure of the lipidic membrane allows them to live in the waters. The temperature increase 100 degrees, and in very salty, acid environments. I would like to show a picture of this microorganism. So here, this geysers, for example, is a niche, and the organism that is fit to this particular niche is this microorganism. The next example is from the robots. In our multi-agents and robotics department, we have the sort of positioning system. I would like to show the picture. On the ceiling there are mounted some ultrasonic waves detectors. If robot is equipped with the emitter, it can find its position. Of course, outside of the laboratory, this emitter is useless. And the same robot, if it's not its morphology is not fitted to this environment, it cannot benefit from this niche. And the last example is the market view of robot adaptation, as proposed by McFarland in 1999. We can find many parallels. I will discuss only the first one. The feature, the return of investment. For biology, we can say the number of offspring, and for the market, it's a gross income, assuming there's no failures. And the example, as far as I know, in Japan, the robotic toys are very popular. For example, Aibo, it's Robodog, and this another doll is Pino. And the niche is the toys market. And the adaptation for this market, these robots must attract children. Simply, it must be fun to play with these robots. And they compete with the other non-robotic toys, as well with the living animals, like pets. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
That's all from Warsaw. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, okay. Thank you very much. Do we have a question directly to the presentation that we have had from Warsaw? I think this is an interesting point. Also, if you think about, robots, as was mentioned, robots, they compete, of course, with human labor. They compete with other robots. McFarland also argues that robots and devices, cars, for example, they self-reproduce because the good cars, basically they spread their genes and, they sell well, so basically they take over, whereas the bad cars, the poor bad cars, they will eventually get lost in this process of technological evolution. So in a very kind of literal sense, he takes this idea of evolution. And it's not so surprising because originally, now economists get their inspiration from evolutionary theory, but before, Darwin himself got a lot of inspiration for his theory from the economists at the time. And so it's not really surprising that there's a very close relationship between the two. But do we have a comment or a question on the presentation from Warsaw? I think these are some interesting concepts that everybody should know about. All right. If that's not the case, then I would like to move on to the next and main topic of today, which is designing from the bottom up. And I'm basing the introduction here on Valentina Breitenberg's book, Vehicles, Experiments in Synthetic Psychology. And I can really recommend this book too, especially the first half. The second half is somewhat, I think, less interesting, but the first half is really exciting. And this book, in contrast to Understanding Intelligence, has the great advantage that it's very thin. So you can read it very quickly. It's a very thoughtful book, and I would like to give you an idea now. Before I do that, I have an experiment that I would like to do with everybody in the global virtual lecture hall. And I would like to show you a video. It's again a video about the Didabots. And I would like to ask you to carefully observe what's going on, because afterwards I will ask some of the sites what's, their comments on this video. So, Yoshi, can we now have the first video, the KVAI? Well, this is an experiment that we made a couple of years ago in Zurich. It was done by René Tabukhorst, an ethologist, a biologist in our laboratory, who is now a lecturer in England. Carefully observe what's going on. all real speed. I mean, this is real time. Okay. Okay. Right. So, you have all been observing what's going on, so maybe we can now switch to Munich. Munich, Mark, can you take over? And we can have some comments from Munich.
Did anybody see something interesting here? Would somebody like to summarize what he's seen here or throw in a couple of descriptions? Any ideas? Andy? Mikro Nummer 2, bitte.
Is it okay here? Or?
Here.
No. They were. It seemed to me that they were trying to chase each other, so they were looking where the other one is, and they were having something like the chase.
A following.
A following. So
okay.
And sometimes they get. Yeah.
You wanted to say something else?
Yes, and sometimes it seems that they got stuck at the walls, but I don't know why.
Yeah. Sometimes they get stuck.
That's just from
Right.
us, I think.
Get stuck at the walls. Okay, do we have comments from other comments from Munich or from other sites? I have a comment maybe from, I don't know, Beijing? What do you think?
They avoid obstacles such as walls and other vehicles, but he can't see the vehicle in front of it, and so they just stay forward, such like this.
Can you say, I didn't quite clearly, can you speak clearly into the microphone, please? I didn't quite acoustically understand what you were saying.
Okay, I think it avoid obstacles.
Avoid
such like walls. Yeah. And but it can't see the vehicles in front of it.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's a bit like the Swiss robots, in some sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it looks
Avoid
like a follow.
Okay. Remember also the frame of reference problem that we mentioned last time. Okay. Okay. If we have, do we have comments from other sites? If that's not the case, then I will, give some comments myself. Of course, I think the point is, if you say they chase each other, what kind of, if you think about the frame of reference problem, what kind of perspective is that? That's an observer's perspective. When you say, well, they're chasing each other, basically you are attributing to the others that they want to chase each other. They sometimes get stuck at the wall. That's an observation of behavior. They avoid obstacles. This is clearly an explanation about the internal mechanism. Okay? This is about the internal mechanism. Now, I'm going to tell you what they actually do. They're actually following a light. They're just programmed to follow a light. Now, the robots have a light on top, So when they see a light, they just follow it. So one robot is moving, then the other one is just following it. Now, why do they, and then someone, talked about getting stuck at the wall. Yeah, why do they get stuck at the wall? Why do they run against the wall? Well, one explanation would be, they can't see in front. The other explanation, if you think about the light following mechanism, is you saw that the light is being reflected. Now, if the robot has a light on top, that light's being reflected, then the robot is moving towards the light, and it will just move into the wall, because it doesn't know where the light is coming from. Right? And then, of course, the other robot is following it, pushing the first one against the wall, and they get stuck. And then what happens? Because the arena is closed, the other robot, the single robot, is coming kind of around. It wasn't programmed to do that. That was actually happened by chance, but the chance was very high because the arena is closed. It came around, and then, it moved towards the two robots because they have two lights. So two lights, attract, of course, the other robots more. It moves towards these robots. First time around, it doesn't really. It basically hits one robot a bit at the end. And maybe we can show the. Can you show it again quickly? Just maybe I will comment while we're watching the video. I think that's maybe the best we do. So we play this one again, so that you can see what I'm saying here. Okay. So here they're just following the light. Of course, they're wiggling a bit. That's the real world. There's a lot of noise. There is a lot of reflection. And here they're basically in one cluster, and then just by random noise, they move apart again. And here there are two following each other. Now the one behind is losing it a little bit. You see, it's kind of turning around. Now it's following again. And here they are, stuck against the wall. Okay? And then the other one, see, it's even moving in the other direction, but because the arena is closed, it's deflected. There's no program. It's just light following. And it's really interesting behavior. So here are the two robots. Now it's kind of hitting, but not really hitting. Now, it's because the arena is closed, it turns around, goes back, because there are two lights there, and so the robots get freed. Okay, thank you. And so you could also say what the robots are doing is actually they're helping each other. I put this in quotation marks because the helping is in our heads rather than in the heads of the actual robots, because they don't know that they're helping each other. They're just following a light. Now, some other people said, they're disturbing each other. So the third one that's coming back is jealous about the first two. That they're, together against the wall, and he's trying to disturb the others. Disturb because it or he, I don't know what to say here, is jealous. Of course, again, the observer's perspective. And the internal mechanism is just the slide following. Okay. Well, there's a reason, of course, why I gave you this case study now. Because now we're going to look at these Breitenberg vehicles, designing from the bottom up. So what it is, just briefly before the break, I want to get you an idea that then during the break you have something to think about. Otherwise you might get bored during the break, so you have something to think about. So what Breitenberg did is he proposed a series of vehicles of increasing complexity. First vehicle very simple, second vehicle a bit more complicated, demonstrating how you can get interesting behavior with very simple principles. And what I would like to do now before the break is to give you something to think, some food for thought, and I just explain vehicle 1, and after the break I will ask you what this vehicle does. So these vehicles are very simple. So here's a vehicle. It's got a sensor in the front, and this is a sensor for a particular quality. This can be, for example, for light, a sensor for light. It can be a sensor for temperature. It can be a sensor for chemical concentrations. It can be a sensor basically for anything. And then there is a motor. So there is a sensor, and there is a motor. And the more of this quality that the sensor delivers, so the higher the temperature, the more intense the light, or the higher the chemical concentration, the more it will drive this motor. So the motor, how fast the motor goes, depends directly on what this sensor actually measures. Now, assuming, and this is called a Breitenberg vehicle type 1, assuming that you're putting a vehicle like that into the water, how will it actually behave? Mind you, it just has this one sensor and one motor, and the more the sensor delivers, let's say the higher the temperature, the faster the motor will propel the vehicle. What will it do? How will it move? So that's for the break. I think we now take about a 15-minute break, and I'll see you back after the break with some good answers to this question. So let's take a break now. Thank you very much. If anyone would like to ask questions during the break, you're of course very welcome, from anywhere to ask questions anytime. Maria, how's the sound? I get the impression that there's sometimes it's too kind of loud or too directly in front of the mouth.
No, I think it's pretty good. Okay. Do you agree also, Hanspeter? I think it's pretty good now, the audio quality from your side.
Oh, okay.
Just let me unmute the video again so that you can see us. Okay. No, I think it's pretty good. I mean, in Warsaw, we had some packet loss. This is because there was sometime a little bit grease at the audio quality. But from your side, or just speak a little wide, I mean, I think the audio quality is really perfect that we received from your side.
Okay, good. And what was with Beijing? That was kind of a bandwidth problem, or?
No, we still don't know what's happened again. We are packing now with the chat client. And we will see if, I don't know if they disconnected when they hear that there was a break. I can't imagine, definitely.
Aha.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Oh, there's another task sheet. Okay.
Just let me check.
I have the other two.
Yes, it
was relatively slow, but
Then we have Professor Katharina Braun. She is from Magdeburg, and she is a developmental biologist, and she is giving to honor Konrad Lorenz on Tuesday morning, on Saturday morning it is, a lecture commemorating.
Now the sound from Beijing is gone.
Okay, we are trying to fix it again. Beijing, can you hear me now, right now? I think that the video conference system is muted now. Beijing, can you please check your audio system?
Yeah, it would be a pity to miss Professor Peppel's comments.
Yes.
Because we can't hear anything now.
We are packing with the chat client.
Oh, yes, please do. You can hear absolutely nothing now.
Oh, yes, they muted the microphone. So we are now sending a message that we would like to hear the comments.
Right.
Okay, I hope they unmute again in minutes so that we also can hear the comments from the professors. Okay, thank you, Beijing.
Hello.
Yes,
okay, now we can hear
we can hear you now.
We didn't hear Professor Peppel's comments, but now I think we can hear it.
Just give us introductions about his workshop in Peking University. Yes. Workshop.
Now I can't hear anything. Is anybody kind of making a comment?
At this moment, no. Everybody's muted the other sides.
Ah, okay. Simon? Zurich? Simon? Are you there? Maybe not. In Zurich? Are you around?
Yes. Just let me unmute again the video so that you can see us.
Is everything ready for the demonstration in Zurich? For Mia? Are you around in Zurich? Not much reaction there from Zurich.
Yeah, Rolf, I think Simon is currently not in the lecture hall.
Yeah. And for Mia isn't there either, huh?
I don't know.
They are supposed to both give a demonstration. Okay. For Mia?
Hello?
It's
Mia?
Hi, Fumia.
Speaking?
Yeah, hi. So, our cameraman is asleep. So, maybe can you wake up the cameraman? Excuse me, our cameraman is asleep. So we just woke him up. Okay. So maybe you can switch to the other camera so I can talk to Fumia. Okay. Everything is functional again. So is everything ready for the demonstration, Fumia?
Yes, I think everything okay, under control.
So you have the Stumpy. Is Raja around? Raja?
Yes, the new Stumpy and the mini Stumpy. It's going to take 5 minutes. It's okay?
Okay, excellent. And Simon isn't around yet? Or he had to get some espresso? Okay, Simon.
Yeah, man. Hello, Rolf. So I'm ready for the demo of the Breitenberg vehicles.
Excellent. Okay, so I think the break's over. Maybe we can play the trailer. Okay, welcome back after the break. So I'm sure you have all been thinking hard about what this vehicle is going to do. So maybe we can ask first the students in Munich. Can we switch to Munich for some comments on how this vehicle is actually going to move? Mark, can you take over?
Do any of you have some ideas what this vehicle will do? Have you thought about it? Andy?
You put it in the water and then, maybe it's got a sensor for temperature.
Will it move towards higher temperature? Will it move away? Speak in the microphone, please.
Just comment on, what the vehicle will potentially do.
No, I think the vehicle will move towards the higher temperature, finally, because always when it's turning towards a higher temperature, it goes faster, and maybe if it loses the track, then it will slow down, and until it keeps up, or another time finds the high temperature, and so.
Well, you're saying it moves towards higher temperatures. How would it do that?
How? I think it's like similar to what bacteria do in chemotaxis. So when they lose the track, they slow down. I don't know.
Yeah. 1 second, please. We have a problem with the microphone.
It's cracking continuously.
Yes.
I think. Hello?
Okay, don't move it. Keep it still, and now talk.
I won't move.
Oh, this is awful.
I can't speak here. Sorry.
We'll try with mine. 1 second, please.
Yeah, maybe we have to switch off that one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is much
You
better.
want to know how the vehicle moves?
Yes.
Or did you understand what I said?
Okay. So, how is it going to move towards higher temperatures?
I think it always, when it finds the stimulation of the high temperature, it will move faster towards the temperature. And even if it loses the point or where the location where the higher temperature comes from, then it will slow down and keep be in a certain area. But I think it's some kind of approximation, but slowly.
Okay.
It's a little bit difficult to explain it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much for the comment. I mean, the idea is that here, this vehicle is extremely simple. I think what you're describing would be the abilities of a much more complicated vehicle. This vehicle, only senses temperature, and when the temperature is high, it will go fast, and when it's low, it will go slower, but it has no way of knowing, let's say, a gradient, or in which direction there is a higher temperature. So basically, it will move fast. The question that Mark de Camps was asking, it will move fast when the temperatures are high, and it will move slowly when the temperatures are low. So imagine it's in a high temperature region, it will move fast, and then it gets into colder water, it will move slowly. So it will actually move away from higher temperatures. It's kind of as if it dislikes higher temperatures and likes lower temperatures, but of course there's nothing about like and dislike in this vehicle. Again, the frame of reference problem. It's just got this very extremely simple mechanism here of just, the more you get here on this sensor, the more is kind of transmitted to this motor. But the point is also, it will definitely not go straight. It will not move straight. Why not? Why will it not move straight, even though it only has one motor? Why will it not move straight? Maybe Mark, you can take over and see if you can get some answers of why it will probably not move straight. Even though, if you look at the internal mechanisms, it only goes basically straight. Why will it not go straight?
No, you. Try.
Okay.
Practically, it should go straight in a line, and then probably when it reaches a region with lower temperature, just by erratic movement, it will change direction, like the Dialbots did in the film before, because there is no mechanism to change direction in its construction itself.
That's right. So and actually the noise, or what you're talking about, is coming from the environment. So basically, if you think about the ocean, there are currents in the ocean, there are obstacles, there's other animals, there's other fish, and so it gets caught by these currents. It may be turbulence is produced by other fish, it may hit other fish, whatever. So there are tons of possibilities, tons of things that can happen to this vehicle, although if you look at the internal mechanism only, it will only go straight. In reality, it will not go straight at all. Okay, so this is vehicle 1, very simple. I mean, you can't get any simpler than vehicle 1. Okay, now, as I said, there's a whole sequence of vehicles, and let's pursue these vehicles a little bit. So let's look at vehicle 2. So Breitenberg increased the complexity, and here's vehicle 2. Let's assume that we have light sensors. Here's a light source. Here's one of these vehicles 2. And it's got one sensor here. It's got another sensor here. And now this has not one motor, but 2 motors. And they are connected to the sensors by positive connections. So the more you get here, the more you get on the sensor here, the more you get on the motor. Right. Now, and here I draw another vehicle. It's also got 2 sensors and 2 motors. And it's also positively connected, but to the opposite side. Okay? Also positive, so the more you get on this sensor, the more this motor is driven. So how will this vehicle move? Maybe the students here in Tokyo can quickly answer and explain what these vehicles are doing, how this, for example, let's start with this. Let's start with this one over here. This is actually vehicle 2A. This is vehicle 2B. How will vehicle 2A move? Maybe you can pass the microphone to... would one of the students like to volunteer which way this vehicle is going to move? Okay. Yeah, back there? Right.
Vehicle 2A will avoid the light source.
Okay, so it will move something like in this direction, right?
You're right.
And why?
If the light sensor get a very luminous light,
right,
and the light motor will accelerate, so the vehicle direct direction tends to the left.
Right. Can you say? Right. Can you say something that's perfectly correct? So, because this one gets more light than the other one, it will drive this motor faster than the other one, so it will turn away. Can you say something about the speed? Something about the speed of the vehicle.
Yeah, speed.
Okay, well, I think the speed, you want to comment on the speed, or, I mean, the more light it gets, the faster it will be. So if it moves away from the light source, it will obviously slow down. Right? Okay? Yep. Okay, and now maybe the other vehicle. You want to comment on the other vehicle as well, or would someone else like to take over? Or maybe you can... Huh? Or you want to comment on... Can you comment on the other one as well, maybe? Or maybe back there we have a candidate. Okay. How is the other one going to move?
Well, the mechanism will be exactly the reverse, so it will move towards the light source with increasing speed.
Okay, so this one is closer. Can you say something about speed? This one is closer, so the right motor will get more speed, so...
Well, the speed will increase as it approaches the light, since intensity of the light should increase too.
Right, and if you think that this is a physical light, what might happen?
Well, it should bump into it sometimes.
It will bump into the light source, so, and, getting ever faster, so it's kind of aggressive sort of behavior. Okay, but aggressive again then is, of course, frame of reference. I mean, that's my attribution. The vehicles don't know anything about the fact that they're actually being aggressive. Right, so these are vehicles 2A, 2B. By the way, what we saw in the video with the helping behavior was basically Brandenburg vehicles just moving towards a light source. So it was basically what we saw in the video was basically actually this kind of vehicle. And you see that how these mechanisms are extremely simple, but the behavior is relatively interesting. Okay. So this was basically what we had. This was the light following behavior in the video. Okay? Now, let's continue. Vehicle 3. I mean, I'm not going to continue forever on this, but vehicle 3 is also, I think, an interesting one. It's exactly the same. 2 motors, 2 sensors. But rather than being connected positively, they're connected negatively. So the more light, the more the motors will slow down. So you have negative connections, right? And then I don't think I need to ask the question. I mean, it's obvious what this vehicle is going to do. This sensor will get more light, so this motor will be slower than this one. If this one is slower, this one will move towards the light source. But what happens with the speed, in contrast to the one that we had before, this one will slow down and will probably gently stop in front of the light source. Okay, and the same, of course, you can now connect in the other direction as well with negative connections. Okay, now, this is called vehicle 3. It's basically the same as vehicle 2, but this time with negative connections instead of positive connections. Okay, now let's make something more interesting. Let's do the following. Instead of having just one type of sensor, so we have this type of sensor again, this type of sensor, and then let's add another kind of sensor. Well, let me just do it like this. Let's add another type of sensor. Again, we have the 2 motors. And now, let's connect these sensors. Let's, for example, say we connect this one here and this one here with a positive connection. And we connect this one here with a positive connection and this one here with a positive connection. And let's assume that these are sensors for light and that this is for proximity. What is proximity? Proximity means the closer you are, the higher the activation. It's a measure for, when you're really close, you get a lot of activation. This can be easily implemented by, for example, infrared sensors, very cheap infrared sensors. Now, question. Again, maybe the students here in Tokyo, what will this vehicle do? Now, this is more difficult already. What will this vehicle do? Now, this is more difficult. Do we have any volunteers here for what this is going? Or Well, maybe we can switch to another site. Well, how about Warsaw? Warsaw, do we have any ideas in Warsaw what this vehicle will do?
This
is the last vehicle that... Yes.
We just try to arrange the answer.
Okay.
It's difficult to predict behavior, as the signal from one sensor will tell the robot to go toward the light source, and the second will make robot to go to avoid the light source.
Right. And so what will the vehicle finally do?
Maybe keeping
you're absolutely right.
Maintaining the distance toward running around the circle, maybe around this the light source.
Right. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's very difficult to predict what this vehicle is going to do, and what it finally will do is, I mean, simple as it is, and the mechanisms, mind you, are completely deterministic. So there's not random. Of course, there's always a bit of random noise because it's a real-world system. But in principle, it's deterministic. And still, it's very hard to predict what's going to happen, and I think you're absolutely correct about that. And what you were describing about the behavior is also absolutely correct. Now, what the vehicle actually will end up doing depends on the relative strengths of these connections. So you have to see how the relative strengths are. And, you know, if, for example, this strength is very high, this sensor will react very early and will dominate, you know, what the other sensor will do, and so on. So it depends very much on the specific relations and the specific connection strengths that you actually have. Okay. So there's no straightforward answer. And then imagine, I mean, you can take other vehicles. Okay, let's just... Well, we've had that. Let's before we go on to discuss further vehicles.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh, yeah,
Professor
okay, please
Pfeifer,
do.
can I ask you a question?
Yes, please do.
Yes, I think there's another issue here. If you want to integrate, for instance, visual and auditory information, you must have something like a time window within which information is integrated. Because in the model you just described, you assume the simultaneity of the two senses, and that is never the case, actually. Take, for instance, auditory information. You have a transmission time of sound. So how about this question to integrate sensory information to define then the trajectory of the robot? You get my point?
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's a very good point. And indeed, I mean, we have all these sensors and the processing, they have particular time characteristics. Now, I don't know what the rate is at which the sensors are actually read by the system. In the case of, you know, cheap infrared sensors, in the case of cameras, for example, we have, you know, frame rates varying depending on the robot that it is, between 5 and 50 frames per second. In the case of infrared sensors, I actually don't know what it is. But you're absolutely right, and we often have robots, even though, you know, they have sensors. We have the story that when we have fast robots, that they will, even though they have a sensor, we're reading the sensor, we have an obstacle avoidance program, it will run into the obstacle because the time frame, you know, to read the next sensory information is actually too large. So I think absolutely this issue of time frames, which may actually be different for different sensory channels, is an essential issue that we need to take into account, and we do have to take this into account as an explicit design issue. Yes, thank you for your comment. I think this is important. Yeah. Great. Okay. Right, so I think it's time to switch to Zurich for a demonstration of the Breitenberg vehicle. Simon?
Yes. Simon, can you hear me?
Simon, can you demonstrate us some real-world Breitenberg vehicles on robots? Okay,
So
can you take over?
Yes, sure. So we have the picture, we have the sound. So I'm going to implement actually those three kinds of vehicles here on a real robot, which is a Kepera. I guess half of the students here in Zurich already know how it's working. So I don't know, yeah, you can see it. So it's a very small robot which is developed here in Switzerland. It's used quite a lot in research and education. And you can see, so it has two wheels, and here different sensors which can detect lights as well as proximity. Actually, it's infrared sensors. Okay, so that's just a description of the robots. And now let's see actually how it's working in the real world. So the first experiment is going to be a Breitenberg type 1. So unfortunately, they're not really waterproof. So I'm going to put them on a table rather than in water, if you don't mind. Okay. And this one, it has basically a light sensor, and the two motors are connected together. So as one of the students said, it should actually move away from lights. And now let's see how it's doing in real world. Maybe you could
so this is Breitenberg Type 1?
Type 1, exactly. Okay. And funnily, actually, as we can see, it's actually moving towards the light source. And now, because it's just over or under the light source, it's not detecting light anymore. So actually here it's kind of looking for light. Or, following light, if I try to follow. So we were expecting some kind of repellence behavior. And
I'm not sure, Simon, I'm not sure following is really the right word here. I mean, it looks as if it were following light.
We could say, as an observer, I mean here, one could say it's kind of following the light. I don't know if everyone can see.
Right. If the light source is moving.
Exactly. So that was type 1. I don't know if there's any comment or question coming from anywhere.
Or maybe we can move on. We are a bit short of time, so maybe we can move on to another example.
That's a vehicle type 2, which is using two proximity sensors on each side. So it's a bit cheating because actually it has default motion, so it's moving. And when it sees an obstacle, it's moving away. As you can see, because the mechanism. And something funny, actually, we would think that this vehicle should be kind of timid, and if we put an obstacle just in the front, as you can see, it's pushing this one away. So we could say, as an observer, it's kind of, more aggressive than what we would have thought first by looking at the internal mechanism. So that's Breitenberg vehicle 2. Now let's switch to Breitenberg vehicle.
This is with positive connections.
Exactly.
Yep.
So this one, just have to switch, 1 second. So this one is going to use two kind of sensors, one for light with positive connection to the opposite motor and some proximity to the same motor. So basically it's avoiding obstacle. As you can see, oops, here.
Right.
And as you can see, with negative connection, it's doing that much better. I mean, it's moving away when it sees an obstacle. And before it falls down from the table, it's this time really following light, turning to the direction of the light source.
At what rate are the sensors read?
Yeah, that's a good question.
How many times?
The reading, I think the reading is quite fast, at least something like 30 hertz. But then there's a problem with the controller. I think the controller here, you see the reaction time is, it's something like 10 hertz. So there are, several factors determining the whole thing. So it's hard to say.
So this would be in response also to Professor Peppel's question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, here we are. So because we are maybe short of time, I'll let you take over again.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks very much, Simon from Zurich. So maybe we can switch back here to Tokyo. Let me just briefly make the whole situation a bit more complex. So what we've had so far is we've had connections that were linear in the sense, from sensors to motors that were linear in the sense, the more you get of this particular sensory quality, the faster the motors will go. Now what we have here is on this axis here, we have the intensity of the sensor. This is kind of the sensor. And this is the output to the motor. Okay? Now, as you can see here, you have, for example, line A like this. So if you had a light source here, and you have a vehicle with, a light sensor or something here, motors here, and you start the vehicle somewhere here. Start. What will the vehicle do? It's pretty obvious what it will do, right? It will first, here, when it's far away, it's got low intensity, right? It will go slowly. As it gets closer, it will speed up. And as it gets very close, it will slow down again. Or this one, for example, will not do anything until it gets here to this particular threshold, and then it will start moving. So, for example, in the morning, you could say when it gets brighter and brighter, and the Brandenburg vehicle has a sensor for light, at some point it will wake up and start moving. Now, if you imagine that you have several robots, as in the DIDABot experiment that you saw in the video, and they all have a light source on top, and they all have, maybe several sensors, and maybe they have nonlinear connections, it will not be possible to predict the behavior of these robots anymore. So we have chaotic behavior even though the mechanisms are deterministic. Right. Just to quickly finish before we turn to the latest just to quickly finish up this business with Brandenburg vehicles. Now, vehicle 5 is kind of adding brain power. So making the connections, instead of just having a connection from the sensor to the motor, like this, you can put more connections in between the sensors and the motors. So these are kind of vehicles 5 and up, basically with the exception of vehicle 6, which I don't have time to go into here. Okay, now we will talk about this just in the next lecture when we talk about neural networks, where we see how this can be done. But to finish the chapter on Brandenburg vehicles, you're going to have to do some reading, but to finish what I would like to say here, let's make a thought experiment. Let's do the following. Let's take a Brandenburg Type 1 vehicle. One sensor, one motor. Now, instead of having one connection, let's say, instead of having a trivial brain, one connection is, you can't really talk about a brain, but let's say, instead of having this trivial brain, now what you do is you put a brain, with, let's say, 10 to the, 14 synaptic connections in here, which is roughly the size of complexity of a human brain. Now, if you do this, put this into this Brandenburg vehicle 1, what will happen? What will happen? This is the last question for today. As soon as somebody answers this question, we can switch to the latest from Japan. Well, can we have a comment maybe from Beijing? Beijing, do you have a suggestion on what's going to happen? And we have the brain scientists there in Beijing. People who like brains, they like people who like big brains. So, are there any suggestions?
Well, I'm not a typical student of Beijing University, but I guess you expect nothing happen because it's a useless brain.
That's right. Why is it useless? Because, it's got very little to do. It gets sensory stimulation from one sensor and can produce output to one sensor, right? And it's true. It's completely useless. So what's this vehicle going to do with it? It's not going to be very useful, right? And this is a principle in designing systems, and you find that in all natural systems, it's called the principle of ecological balance. This is an ecologically unbalanced system. It says, given a certain task environment, there is a match in the complexity of sensory motor and neural control systems. This is the first part. We only consider this. The second part we talk about later. Now, if you just have a huge brain, a huge neural control system, it's going to be entirely useless. So unless you also augment the complexity of the sensory and the motor system, and maybe the environment, then the big brain is going to be very useless. This is the principle of ecological balance that we will encounter many times later on. So this would be an ecologically unbalanced system. Vehicle 6, please read about Vehicle 6. I don't have time. We have to come to a close on Breitenberg. The last point is Breitenberg himself posits the law of uphill analysis and downhill invention. Now, what is this? What does this mean? It means that if you have to analyze an organism and try to understand how it functions, this may in fact be the much more difficult task than just building a system and, constructing a system and seeing what it actually does, inventing a new system, generating interesting behavior. I mean, we saw that these very simple creatures, they produce, well, at least some people would think so, very interesting behavior, even though they're extremely simple. And it may be much more difficult to actually try and understand existing systems and how they really function. So there is also comments on this in the book. But just remember the law of uphill analysis and downhill invention. It's counterintuitive because normally people think when you have a system and you just have to understand, it's much easier than actually building new systems. But here it shows that maybe being creative, is easier than, being analytic. Okay. Well, this concludes chapter 6. And what I would like to do now is really switch. I would like to switch to the... now the last part, the latest from, and what we have today is we have something from the latest from Japan, and we have latest from Zurich, from our laboratory in Zurich. Now, what I would like to do is so I will first make a brief comment about latest from Japan, and then we will have Fumiya Iida. This is Fumiya Iida. Fumiya will talk briefly about some research that he did in Zurich. So latest from Japan, I will talk very briefly, give you an outline of the International Robot Exhibition that just ended this weekend, as I mentioned before, in Tokyo. And then we have some case studies from the Department of Information, from the AI Lab in Zurich. So this is the International Robot Exhibition. Now, of course, as always, there are a lot of industrial robots. And this was actually the bigger part of the exhibition, but the title of the exhibition was kind of from industrial robots to human interaction or to everyday life. So the idea is to bring robots. I mean, this was really impressive, showing off here, for example, showing off the Kawasaki robot, moving around a motorbike at great speed. And so there's really big, impressive, things that you can see. It's really cool. And there's lots of this, really big things, and I like big things. But then there was also a lot on what you might call service robots. There is, for example, here there's a surveillance robot, kind of a policeman, disguised as a robot. There is a demining robot searching for mines. There are two robots here searching in rubble for survivors after a natural disaster, after an earthquake or, terrorist attack. And here I think is a really interesting one that kind of really can move through any kind of of a territory. It's kind of a snake-like robot. There's a lot of work on support systems, for example, there's work on hands. Here's a hand, robot hand. We will see a very nice robot hand next week from Hiroshi Yokoi from Hokkaido University. And here is kind of a support system. You can see here is if you don't have sufficient muscle strength on your legs, you can put on a kind of exoskeleton, if you like, and then you have to wear a knapsack like that, and this will actually support you in walking if you don't have sufficient muscle strength anymore. The biggest part, or let's say the part that has attracted the most people and the most attention, always tons of huge crowds in front of these stands, is entertainment. It seems that just people like entertainment. I mean, that's just the way it is, you know. People like entertainment. And here's some entertainment robots. Some of them are pretty weird things, but I think kind of funny. Some more entertainment robots. So these are all packed with sensors and actuators. And for example, this robot, the SEAL robot, that was developed by at AIST by Takanori Shibata, is also used in hospitals to entertain children, because many real pets are not allowed in hospitals because of allergies and hygienic reasons, but you can have pets in there. So the children very much like this. They also use them in homes for the elderly to entertain the elderly. Then there was a small flying robot which attracted. It's about this big, maybe like a hand. It's got two rotors, very small. Attracted a lot of attention. I don't really know why, but it did attract a lot of attention. And of course, I was very happy to see the Karakuri Ningyo. Karakuri Ningyo, as always, you know, as we had last week, as we showed them last week. And then there is a lot of humanoid robots. So here we have humanoid robots, and there are many of them. And, I think people like humanoid robots very much. They draw crowds. Also, there's a lot of basic research that goes into this. For example, this one was designed, among other things, to cooperate with humans. This one is using so-called, a particular type of material. For example, here you can see these are so-called SMAs, shape memory alloys, that can also be used as artificial muscles, and they go back, you can deform them, and if you apply electric current, they will go back into their original shape. And here are some also, this is one that plays soccer, and so on. Then communication is a big thing, is a very big topic, communication with robots. And here is one that actually in the first lecture we saw a video of children interacting with RoboBee. This is Max Lungarella, a PhD student in our laboratory, who is playing with this robot instead of doing his research on his PhD. But this is a very popular robot. And then one of the robots that attracted really most attention is this Actroid robot, and it looks awfully real. I mean, this robot talks, and then the facial expression, it really has facial expressions. It has pneumatic actuators, kind of artificial muscles. So these are kind of rubber tubes, and if you apply air pressure, they will contract, and then together with the materials, with the silicon rubber that they use for the face, it gives awfully realistic facial expressions. And apparently, it draws a lot of interest, especially from kind of middle-aged men there. And here is, just some more pictures of this robot. I mean, sometimes it's really hard to distinguish, which is the robot and which is the real person here. Okay, another robot, the face robot, which reacts to language, displays facial expression by developed at the Science University of Tokyo. It was actually the first robot in the world to display real facial expression. It was developed, I think, roughly 10 years ago, probably. Maybe 8 years ago, Yasuo, I don't know. Roughly something like that. maybe 8 years ago. So this was the first one. This was the first robot to display actual facial expression using also pneumatic actuators. So these particular rubber tubes. Okay, so that concludes the robot exhibition. This was just a very short overview, but I kind of think this is interesting as the latest from Japan. Now, we make a big jump over, the entire continent of Asia back to Zurich. And I would like to show you now a little bit, just very little, of the Artificial Intelligence Laboratory in Zurich. So here's we just moved into new lab space a few months ago. Here are just some pictures. Here are the people who work there. I will not go into the details. Of course, how could it be? How else could it be? We're employing a synthetic methodology. I don't need to explain that. We know what this is. And so we'd like to build robots. Here are some older ones, old robots. Here are some more recent ones. Here are some that we developed specifically for locomotion. And now I want to give you a few examples of the synthetic methodology. So one project that we did a few years ago was looking at the navigation behavior of desert ants, and I mentioned that example before. So we built a number of robots to imitate certain aspects of the behavior. We are interested in morphology of insect eyes. They have interesting shapes, and shapes interact. The shapes of these insect eyes, they interact with the ants' neural processing, and we built a robot. Lukas Lichtensteiger and Peter Eckenberger built a robot that can actually evolve the morphology of an insect eye. Okay? We're also interested in brachiation. This robot was developed by Dominik Frutiger, who is, by the way, now in Japan doing his diploma thesis. We're interested in biped walking. This is the fork-leg robot, which was developed by Hiroshi Yokoi and Kojiro Matsushita in our laboratory. And some people said this is the ugliest robot that they've ever seen, which may be actually the case. This is elastic life. We use evolution to study elastic forms of locomotion with deformable elastic materials. And, actually, this is rapid locomotion in natural systems, which we will see a little more about in just a second. And maybe we can show the first video. More now, I should say now. More now. Can you show the first video? It's just a very short video. You can see how this robot moves. And mind you, this robot doesn't have any sensors. So there's no feedback from the environment. And it moves very realistically. This is cheap design. Can we see the other? I will show you the slow motion. Can we show the slow motion? I will show you the slow motion now. This robot was developed by Fumiya Iida, by the way. This is the slow motion. You see there is an elastic spine, so the back is kind of moving, and I think it's awfully, natural. And the control is extremely simple, and it's just using kind of spring systems, as you can see in the application sharing. He's got these springs that are attached to various places. Okay. Now, I think what we'll do here is, this is Stumpy, the robot Stumpy. And this was developed by a number of people, Fumiya Iida, Roger Dravid, Max Longarella, and Chandana Paul in Zurich. And Fumiya will now, I think we should switch to Zurich. Fumiya, this will be the last part. Fumiya will make a short demonstration of the Stumpy robot. Fumiya?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay.
So now here we have the robot called Stumpy that I'm going to demonstrate today. The most interesting aspect of this robot is the simplicity of the system, that we have only two motors, one in here, and the other one is here. So, but regardless of this simplicity, the behavioral diversity of this robot is incredible. So this is things I want to show in this demonstration. So, okay, let's see.
Okay, careful.
So,
actually walking.
This is a walking behavior. But just using good timing of two motors, then it can walk, and soon it should show some different behavior. Now it's rather jumping. The table is not really big enough.
The table isn't big enough, huh? It needs a bigger table.
Okay. So, the interesting thing of this robot is, regardless of the simplicity, it can show so many different behaviors in gaits and going the direction of locomotion and so on and so forth. Okay, so I should stop this robot now. And well, thanks, due to the simplicity, we can extract the principle of locomotion and just switch the transferring the idea of Stumpy to the smaller scale, and I can show you the demonstration here. Yeah, you can see it.
Hey, that works.
So the reason we're interested in this small scale is that actually it has a different physics going on compared to the big one. And if you look at the small one, it's moving a rather cute way. And
it's cool. It's really cool.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe. Oh. Okay, it stops.
Okay.
Maybe we should back to Tokyo again.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Fumiya, for a great demonstration. So what I will do now is I will just come to the end and would like to remind you of the assignments. So read chapters 5 up to page 152, that is section 5.2 for those who don't have the page numbers, and chapter 6. And do exercise 4. And I would like to ask the students in Zurich to prepare a short presentation on action selection and segmentation of behavior for next week. Can you see, Simon, that maybe you find a couple of volunteers who would like to do that and present their ideas to the international, to the global, virtual lecture hall?
Yeah,
okay, can you do that?
Yeah, sure, you can count on me.
Okay.
I will wake up early in the morning to work on that. Sure.
Okay, very good, Simon. Okay, well, that concludes the 4th AI lecture from Tokyo. Thank you very much for your attention, and see you all back next week. Bye-bye. Okay. If there are questions or comments after the lecture, well, thank you very much for the attention. Thanks for your patience.